The time is now 10:01 a.m. and I recognize that quorum is present. The pension review board meeting will come to order. Ms. McLaughlin, will you please call roll of the members? Lively. Present. Keith Brainerd.
Here.
Dush.
Here.
Christopher Gonzalez.
Here.
Daniel Harper. Roy Rodriguez.
Here.
Christopher Cook.
Here.
And we are expecting Mr. Harper, so I'm not gonna call for a motion right now just to excuse board members, but if something changes, if he's not able to join us, I'll revisit that motion. We will move on to agenda item number 3, consideration and possible action to approve the July 10, 2025 board meeting minutes. Members have received a copy of the minutes. Are there any corrections to the minutes as circulated? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes as circulated.
So moved.
Motion.
And a second,
Second. Chris Gonzalez.
Gonzalez. Okay, thank you. A motion has been made by Mr. Brainerd and seconded by Mr. Gonzalez. Is there any discussion from the board? Hearing none, all in favor to approve the minutes as circulated, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. The ayes have it and the minutes have been approved as circulated. Next on our agenda is just the opportunity for board members to provide any opening remarks associated with today's meeting. So I'll open it up for board to the extent that anyone has any remarks that they'd like to make. Hearing none, we will move on to public comment. We will accept public comments. All public comments are limited to 3 minutes. Is there anyone in the audience, in person or virtually, who has comments that they'd like to present to the board?
Good morning, Madam Chair, members both in person and attending virtually. My name is Anumeha Kumar. I'm the Executive Director of the Austin Firefighters Retirement Fund. And I'm very happy to be here today to report to you, and I'm sure you all are already aware, that our pension reform, the Voluntary Funding Soundness Restoration Plan, has passed this last legislative session. And on behalf of my board, my membership, as well as the city, I wanted to take this opportunity to thank you all, especially your staff, for providing guidance, technical assistance, and support to the fund and the city throughout the process. It was not an easy process, but the result would not have been possible had it not been the assistance that you all, as well as the staff, your staff provided to us. And I can say confidently, part of the mission and the vision that this board has with regards to funding soundness restoration plan and encouraging systems to be proactive about it really came to fruition in our situation as we partnered with the city, and that resulted in a good reform, and we are looking forward to implementing it. We are already in the midst of it, and we hope to come back and provide updates and positive ones for sure. So thank you so much for that.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a comment. Yes. I want to express my appreciation to Ms. Kumar for your leadership over there. Speaking of being proactive, I think you really created a model the way that you did that. I hope other retirement systems that are in a similar position follow suit. Please pass on my gratitude to your board as well, and also to the city. It looked for a while there like it was not going to happen, and it did. Really, it's a much better outcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
That's my remarks. Thank you.
Awesome. At this time, I'll recognize that Mr. Harper has joined our meeting. The minutes can reflect that, and then I will turn the meeting over to Mr. Brainerd to walk us through agenda item number 6.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members. We have representatives from Marshall Firemen's Relief and Retirement Fund and the city to provide public comment. From the city, from the fund, can you please introduce yourself? And the floor is yours.
We're trying to, our video's been disabled, but we have it enabled on this end. My name's Amy Ware. I'm the maker of Marshall.
One moment, we can't hear you.
Do you have a microphone over here?
No. The video is ready. Should we move to the other side?
I can hear them on my end online, just so that y'all are aware.
Okay, well, I think this is Melissa Bosmer. I'm the city manager. We're going to relocate very quickly here so that you can hear us and see us. Hopefully that will be a little bit better for you. Where's your chair?
Did you say Melissa Boxer?
It's Melissa Bosmer. Yes, sir.
Well, thank you. We can hear you now, not well, but we can hear you. So please feel free to speak up.
We will. Thank you.
And my name is Amy Ware. I'm the mayor of Marshall, Texas.
Welcome, Mayor. The floor is yours.
Well, we appreciate the invitation to be with you this morning. I will share with you that we are currently without a finance director, and so we're a little bit of a disadvantage. We have an interim, but who has no experience with pension systems or actuarials, and so the mayor and I are trying to pick this up and work with our firefighters to come to some sort of agreement. We've been meeting steadily, I believe, since May when their actuarial report was presented. Because we didn't have any experience, the city went through the process of hiring its own actuarial, confirming all of the numbers and helping us understand what you all take for granted in terms of knowledge about what is an actuarial, what is comprised in the actuarial, what are the opportunities, and what does our system look like? Because we just did not have that experience, and it put us certainly at a disadvantage to talk intelligently with our firefighters about it. So since that time, we have been working with our firm. Could you give me my paper? Working with our firm to understand, first of all, what the opportunities are, and second, to have a better understanding what the firefighters are asking of the city. I would be remiss if I didn't, thank you. I would be remiss if I didn't mention that the city has a number of challenges financially, as many small cities do. A standalone fire pension system in a city our size is an ongoing challenge. And I think that the city has done its best over the years, but I would think our firefighters would agree that perhaps we, meaning the local pension board, have not necessarily done everything we need to do to make it as healthy as possible. And so we find ourselves in the position that we are in today, where we are nowhere close to the 30-day, or the 30-year target that we have set for ourselves. One of the things the city did do, and I think that you are aware of it, is that in current fiscal year, and I would offer our fiscal year here is different than most of the state. We are a calendar year fiscal year. So in our current fiscal year, the city contributed not only 100% of funding for all previous agreements, but an additional $250,000 to begin to offset where we were in our pension system. In the discussions we've been having with our firefighter representatives, we have agreed that with the actuarial defined 8% deficit, we have agreed that we will pick up 6% of that in addition to all other contributions. And that in a very short time, an overview of where we've at. We've been meeting consistently. We've been having conversations. Our actuarials have been at our meetings as we talked about opportunities, but we do not have an agreement at this time, and we understand we have missed the deadline.
Now, I would just like
Mayor, can you please repeat what you said with regard to the commitment you have made regarding the city's contributions?
Yes, one of the things the city does is that, and we agreed apparently some years ago, within the last 5 or 10 years, I understand, is that we pay 100% of our contribution, even when positions are vacant. And so that, you know, to continue to maintain the health of the system. And if you're referring to the amount, the additional money that we put in current fiscal year, that was right at $250,000 that was made available to just, you know, as sort of putting it into our local system in an effort to help with the health of our system.
Okay, and did I understand you to say that you have committed to continuing to pay the contribution for vacant positions?
Yes, we have done that, and we agreed to do that.
Thank you. Members, other questions, remarks for the city of Marshall? Thank you, Mayor Ware and City Manager Boxer. Please stay on the line, and hopefully we're going to hear from someone from the pension board. Someone from the firefighter pension board there?
Yes, this is Tanner Lane, and my video has been disabled by the host, so I apologize for that. Ms. Vosmer covered it really well. I do want to make sure y'all recognize. There we go. Ms. Vosmer has been very attentive to our fund since our last valuation. She's been in every meeting, and that's been new to this board, to my knowledge. So I commend her for that. But like she said, we do have kind of a tentative plan. It's still hinging on the membership voting, which we're hoping to hear a response regarding our ADC proposal. We're hoping to hear a response tomorrow at our regularly scheduled board meeting, at which point we'll go to the membership and start making sure everyone understands all the potential changes. Because as y'all are aware, there's feelings on both sides of the fence there. So there's still some hurdles, but we do have majority of an agreement worked out, and we're just waiting on a response for the ADC proposal at this point.
Thank you. Can you tell me your last name again, please?
Lane.
Lane, thank you. Mr. Lane, can you briefly characterize or summarize your ADC proposal?
So essentially, the city they're open to an ADC. It's my understanding they've never been presented with one, so they never had the opportunity to do it. So I'm grateful that they're open to it, and we're proposing essentially after they step up their contributions over the next 3 years, effective in 2029, we will move to making contributions based on an ADC. The city proposed cost sharing at a 2-to-1 ratio, 2 being the city, 1 being the firefighters, for any increases in the ADC. We came back with a proposal that puts a cap on the member contributions. Our suggestion was that we cap that at the normal cost instead of just picking an arbitrary number. We said we'd be willing to fund, potentially we would be willing to fund 100% of our own benefit, but I can't reasonably ask members to fund their benefit and others. And that's what we're waiting on a response for.
You're waiting on the response from your members or the city?
The city, to see if they would be willing to agree to a member contribution cap.
Mayor and Ms. Boxer, do you understand what they're proposing with regard to the employee contribution rate and normal cost?
Yes.
Do you understand the peril of asking employees to pay more than the normal cost?
I understand that we are trying to work towards an agreement to keep benefits intact. Yes.
Okay, thank you. So it sounds like we're talking to each other and we have an understanding of where each side is. Is that fair?
Yes,
Yes, sir.
Please feel free to reach out to the Pension Review Board staff if you need assistance. There's a wealth of knowledge over here and they'd love to help.
well, we appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Members, sorry, go ahead.
Thank you.
Members, any questions, comments for the city? Board? Thank you all very much. We look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, members. Next, I'd like to ask Staff Actuary David Fee to present item 6A, and his material is behind tab 6A. Welcome, Mr. Fee.
I'm David Fee, the staff actuary, here to present item 6A, the actual evaluation report and funding soundness restoration. I think we're having technical difficulties with our clicker here. Is it possible for you to thank you?
We just got it. It worked yesterday.
So today we'll go over changes since the July board meeting, including news updates for 8 systems and a couple of systems that changed their expected return and payroll growth assumptions. For funding progress, we'll look at how key counts and averages have moved over time. For system overview, we'll review key metrics by system type. And we'll look at a list of systems with outlier statistics, such as the longest funding periods and lowest funded ratios. Then in the FSRP report, we'll look at systems that moved to a different risk category since July, and there are quite a few of those. And we'll look at a full list of systems for each risk category, and there are quite a few fewer systems than we're used to seeing there. So under pension system news, Austin Fire, who we heard from, completed their voluntary FSRP. Anson General Hospital, like a lot of our rural hospitals, is terminating their pension and purchasing annuities for the members. Beaumont Fire completed their FSRP. The city will be increasing their contribution rate, and they will also begin funding for vacant positions. I thought they might have been the first city to do that, but we heard from Marshall saying that they've been doing that as well. So when positions go vacant, it causes 2 problems: additional overtime for the remaining members and reduced contributions since there's no payroll for those vacant positions. So we've seen many systems counter this by removing overtime from their definition of pensionable earnings, but it's nice to see cities, the sponsors, taking care of the contribution side of it as well. Members will not, under their arrangement, members will not change their contributions or benefits other than potentially restoring Tier 1 benefits to the Tier 2 members, but only if that will not result in a funding date later than 2050. Next slide. Laredo Fire, they lowered their expected return and increased the city contribution rate. So the city had already increased the contribution rate in their 2023 FSRP, and they've gradually continued increasing contributions up to 22.6% beginning next month. Midland Fire completed their FSRP, and I believe just yesterday we received a valuation report officially showing a funding period below 30 years. Sweetwater Fire completed their FSRP, and that included changing their final average earnings period from 3 years to 6 years and removing overtime from the definition of pensionable earnings. And when you combine these changes with the city's previous contribution increases, that brought them to a funding period below 30 years. Nacogdoches Memorial Hospital completed their FSRP, and that will begin with contributions in the next fiscal year of $925,000, and then increasing each year thereafter. Now, we're used to either actual determined contribution rates or fixed rate contributions. This is going to be something different. It's a suggested schedule of fixed dollar contributions. And so the PRB established requirements for how they can maintain that funding period. Because with a fixed rate contribution structure, we know that if assets go up or down, the contribution is going to stay the same and the funding period is going to adjust. And we know with an ADC, the funding period is going to stay constant and their contributions are going to adjust. Here, we don't really know if their assets were to return negative 10% or a positive 30%. We don't really know under their proposal exactly how they're going to react with the contributions. So we put some parameters to, let them understand how they should operate under those circumstances. Wichita Falls Fire completed their FSRP. The city will be increasing their contribution rate gradually up to 20%. We had two systems change their significant economic assumptions. Beaumont Fire reduced their discount rate by 25 basis points, and Laredo Fire reduced theirs by 30 basis points, but also on the flip side, increased their payroll growth rate by 25 basis points. That does appear reasonable, as over the last 6 years, their payroll growth was 3.4%, and over the last 10 years, it was 4.6%.
So both of those changes increase their unfunded liabilities.
The payroll growth rate does not change the unfunded liability. It changes the funding period. Changing the discount rate definitely increased the unfunded liability.
Thank you.
So now looking at funding progress over the last 2 years, if you look beneath each bar, you can see the date of our board meeting and what the average expected return was on that date. So we decreased slightly over the last 2 years from 6.98% on average to 6.94%. There's two lines on this chart. The top one is the average funded ratio, where TRS and ERS make up 2/3 of the assets and liabilities. On that basis, we're 79% funded. And then on the bottom line is the average funded ratio, where ERS and TRS are just weighted 1/100th, just like every other system. And on that basis, we're closer to 75% funded on average. Looking at the bars, the yellow bar is the count of systems greater than 30-year funding periods. I'm going to wait a second for the. Oh. So. Okay, so Austin Fire passed by to celebrate their FSRP. And so the count of systems greater than 30 years has decreased substantially from 26 in November of 23 down to 18 systems today. But if you take into account all the FSRPs and footnotes and things we're talking about, it's really down to 9 systems. So we've got 2 subject to FSRPs, 6 that are at risk, and our 1 remaining legacy system, our 9 systems. And then looking at the navy blue bar, we're now up to 38 systems that are beneath the 15-year funding period. That's up from 35 in our last meeting. Remember, 15 is our 2040 target under our pension funding guidelines. This is a new slide that shows the funding progress by system. So as they progress, they will move from the lower right to the upper left. Moving left as their funding period improves, and up as their funded ratio improves. And so here you can see just where each system that's under a 30-year funding period is.
And David, you mentioned their names in a certain color means as a distinction.
Yes, the different system types are different colors. So Telfra, for example, is an orange.
Thank you.
Then we have a similar slide here for the systems with funding periods over 30 years. Many of these systems we expect to come off this list: the Austin Fire, Wichita Falls, Beaumont, and Sweetwater on the left. On the right, Tezers, Nacogdoches, and then Midland. Now we actually have a valuation report that shows the funding period under 30. And as the other valuation reports come in, they'll get removed from this list. So it looks like when you look at the slide and you see that most of the systems on the right-hand side will be removed, we can expect FSRPs in the future will likely be smaller in scale than we've seen in the past. In the past, a lot of systems were trying to get from infinite or very high funding periods down to 30, and now it'll probably look more like a system trying to get from a 35-year funding period down to 30. So this shows the expected funding pattern. So there's 2 sample systems. this is the same as the previous slides where everything moves from the lower right to the upper left. So we're showing one sample system with a 45% funded ratio and one with a 60% funded ratio. And as you can see, moving from right to left, most of the funded ratio improvement happens after they reach a 15-year funding period. So looking at the 60% system, in the first 15 years, it'll increase from 60% to 70%, but the bulk of the increase from 70 to 100 would happen after they reach a 15-year funding period. Then looking at the 45% system, they increase from 45 to 60 in the first 15 years, but the bulk of the increase from 60 to 100% happens after they reach a 15-year funding period. On this slide, 30-year amortization period. Rather than funded ratio like we saw on the previous slide, now we're looking at the pattern of unfunded liability. And again, the real magic happens after the system reaches a 15-year funding period. That's when the unfunded liability gets back to the original unfunded liability that it was 15 years previously. And then after that 15-year mark is when you can really see the unfunded liability begin to really find its way down.
Comments, questions for David?
So this slide shows the funding period to avoid negative amortization. So this shows when the unfunded liability will begin to decrease for different assumptions. So our more conservative assumptions are at the bottom left, where the unfunded liability begins to decrease after reaching a 23-year funding period. And our more aggressive assumptions are at the upper right, where the unfunded liability begins to decrease after reaching an 18-year funding period. But again, the most meaningful unfunded liability decreases we'd expect to happen when they get past this 23, past this 18, and more toward 15. Slide, please. This is a system overview by type. So we're showing the median returns, median funding periods, and funded ratios by system type. And I'd point you to the TELFRA systems with a median funding period of 26 and a median funded ratio of 63%. As a reminder, with valuations dated September 1st, 25 or later, you can trigger an immediate FSRP if the funding period is greater than 30 and the funded ratio is below 65%. So you can see that with these medians really close to those numbers, we can expect roughly half systems to be close to that mark. And so in any year when we start seeing negative returns, we might expect to see immediate FSRPs get triggered. But again, they will likely be smaller in scale, aiming from 35 or 40 down to 30 rather than, say, 90 or infinite down to 30. Looking at the upper right box, expected returns. If you look at TELFRA municipal, I just point you to, you can see that the bulk of systems there are between 7 and 7.5%. In the lower left box, the funding period, what's actually interesting to me is the smallest blue box for TELFRA. I do want to point out that we do have 6 systems out of the 42 that are already under our 2040 target of a 15-year funding period. And we do have a bunch more knocking on the door with funding periods below 20 years. So if you look back on slide 9, we have many systems, many TELFRA systems that are between 15 and 20. That includes Cleburne, Corpus Christi, Denison, Lubbock, and I believe at least 3 more. Then looking at the funded ratio box on the lower right, you can see that the dark blue for TELFRA, over half, and quite a few municipal systems are under that threshold of a 65% funded ratio. So now we're looking at the 6-year trend. So we're looking at expected returns, funding periods, and funded ratios, how they've moved over the last 6 years from their previous valuation report 6 years prior. Expected returns are pretty similar across the board with decreases of roughly 30 basis points per system type. For a funding period, other than statewide, TELFRA shows the most funding period improvement of around 9.3 years. Now looking at funded ratios, the 810 systems are interesting there because they already have a low funding period, they tend to show the most funded ratio improvement, but the least funding period improvement since there's not much room left to improve. Looking at the upper right, expected return decrease. What's interesting to me is municipal systems. It's like over 60% of them did not change their expected returns at all, whereas most other system types, quite a few did. In the bottom left, funding period improvement. But all of statewide Telfar municipal have more than half or roughly half improved by 10 or more years on their funding period. 810 systems did not, of course, but if you look to the lower right, the funded ratio improvement, they have the most funded ratio improvements of 5% or more. And that's because they're already at low funding periods. So now we're looking at a spotlight on Galveston Police Pension System. So this is an example of a system that looked great on the previous 6-year trend slide. So they've had great funding period improvement from 30 down to 13 over 6 years. Their funded ratio is significantly improved from 34 to 47%. And their retiree funded ratio is substantially improved from 51 all the way up to 80. But at 47% funded ratio, they're still going to show up on our snapshot slides coming up, such as funded ratios below 50%. So they've come a long way, but still have some improvement left to go. Looking at the employer normal cost, we can see employees are contributing 12% for a 10% normal cost, which can be taken to mean that members are paying more than the cost of their pension benefits. So we end up with competing goals. We want to reach 100% retiree funded ratio. We also want to align the employee contribution rate with the benefit level, and eventually keep maintaining the funding period below 15 years and reach 100% funded ratio. So it'll be an interesting system to watch in the upcoming years as they navigate those competing goals.
Can I stop you for 1 moment? Can you please back up one slide? I don't want the right moment pass without recognizing incredible progress plans in general have made in terms of funding themselves. I know that these plans are funded in a very incremental way, improvements come very slowly, but if you look at this, over any period of time, the improvement is really striking. We were to go back even before 6 years, 10, 15 years, it's an incredible change. There were a lot more systems, really dire actuarial and financial condition 15 years ago. Progress is really powerful. Certainly there's work to be done. The work never ends with these pension plans, the position these plans are in. Certainly due to market improvements, but also a lot of work at on part of the cities, the plan sponsors, and the participants. There's been a lot of given on all sides, and really the results are beginning to show it.
Thank you. So now we can move on to systems with funding periods greater than 40 years. So we're down to 7 such systems, but looking at the top 3, TESRS, Nacogdoches, and Midland have all completed their FSRPs, or SB 2065 for TESRS. So that leaves us with just 4 systems remaining. If you think back to previous meetings, we used to have quite a few more on this slide. Moving on to the next slide. Systems with funding ratios below 65% and funding periods above 30 years. So these systems have both a low funded ratio and a long funding period compared to FSRP thresholds. And as a reminder, any valuation report dated September 1st, 25 or later that would show a funded ratio of below 65% and a funding period greater than 30 years will trigger an immediate FSRP. But you can see a lot of green on this slide, meaning that most of these systems have plans in place. So we're really left with Dallas Police and Fire, and then the 4 systems marked in orange. All those 4 systems are already at risk. So even though there's an immediate trigger, they would trigger an FSRP with any valuation report above a 30-year funding period. So now we'll look at systems with fund exhaustion years. So this means based on current contribution levels, assets are projected to be depleted prior to paying all promised benefits. So we show 7 systems on this slide, but again, as their valuation reports come in, we expect 5 to come off. So Dallas employees, Midland Fire, TESRS, and Wichita Falls Fire have all completed plans, as well as Nacogdoches County Hospital District. That will leave us with only Texarkana Fire and San Angelo Fire going forward. Now we'll look at systems with funded ratios below 50%. You'll notice all systems on this slide have retiree funded ratios below 100%. When a system's assets cannot cover the current retiree benefits, we know that current and future generations of both members and taxpayers have to cover what should have been paid by previous generations. That's why it's very important to have achievable assumptions, because if you're not being realistic about today's cost, then someone else will have to deal with it tomorrow. But the good news is that most of these systems are dealing with it. That, you know, all these orange asterisks show systems with 30-year funding periods. That really leaves us with Marshall Fire, Greenville Fire, and Plainview Fire systems remaining on this slide that have greater than a 30-year funding period. And moving to the next slide, these are additional systems that also have retiree funded ratios below 100%. But you'll notice none of these systems are subject to or at risk of FSRPs. All of them have asterisks except for the top 3 systems, but Sweetwater, Beaumont, and Wichita Falls Fire all just completed FSRPs. Meaning we expect no systems on this slide with funding periods greater than 30 years. So now we'll look at systems with the most recent valuation on or before January 1st, 2023. So these systems' last valuation reports submitted to us were around 3 years ago. And for a system like Weslaco Fire, it's really not that big a deal. But for a system like Greenville Fire, who's at risk, it's possible that they've already triggered an FSRP as of 12/31/24 that would be due 12/31/26. So the longer it takes them to finish the valuation report, the shorter the time they have to work on that FSRP if it were to be triggered. Likewise, looking at a system like Lufkin, who's not at risk, but with the low funded ratio, again, their next valuation report, if it's over a 30-year funding period, would mean they've triggered an FSRP as of 12/31/24. It would be due 12/31/26. And so it would behoove them to finish the valuation report as quickly as possible in case they need to be working on the FSRP. So staff did send a letter out to all systems reminding them of the new immediate FSRP trigger and suggesting that systems that maybe formerly took a little extra time to do their valuations might want to expedite them in the future.
David, there's a requirement for frequency of valuation, is that right?
Yes, all our systems are either annual or biannual. So all of these systems are biennial, and we would expect soon to receive a evaluation that's 2 years after the last one we received.
That's a PRB rule.
I believe it's in statute.
Statute.
Yes.
So in theory, these lagging valuation dates are by violation of state statute.
Well, no, so the statute is saying that they can't go like 4 years without performing a valuation, but I think what they're really talking about is the valuation date. I don't think the statute actually refers to how fast they have to complete the valuation. It's just that they can't do a 22 valuation then follow it up with a 26 valuation. They have to perform that 2024 valuation. And all these systems, I'm pretty sure, are intending to do that. It's just, on average, our systems take about 7 months to complete a valuation, 6 or 7 months, and these are taking more like 12.
Why do you think they're taking so long?
I think just some systems have traditionally taken longer to get the data to their actuary so that it can all begin to be in motion. And it just maybe hasn't been a priority in the past, but I think there are reasons to prioritize it more going forward.
Thank you.
So now we'll move on to FSRP updates. For FSRP status changes, we've had a significant number of systems that were removed from our lists. Beaumont Fire, Midland Fire, Nacogdoches County Hospital District, Sweetwater Fire, Wichita Falls Fire. And then Austin Fire is no longer at risk, and Laredo Fire, Longview Fire are also not going to be at risk. So that leaves us with only two systems left that are subject, Marshall Fire, who we heard from today, and Dallas Police Fire. And then we have 6 systems on the next slide that are at risk. And all of these systems, if their next valuation report were to be above a 30-year funding period, that would trigger an FSRP. And then on the next slide, we just have one remaining legacy system, that's Plainview Fire, with a target date on that legacy FSRP of 2031. So we've had so many systems complete FSRPs that we now divide it across 2 slides. So the first slide are systems that completed under the prior statute. So all these systems, if they were to be above 30, that would be their first FSRP triggered under the 30-year statute. And then on the next slide, a number of systems have completed it under the current statute. So all these systems have completed 30-year FSRPs, and staff have created compliance corridors and communicated to those systems as they completed their FSRPs for how they can move forward. And if these systems do come across a 30-year threshold again, as long as they stay within those compliance corridors that the staff established, they would not trigger the revised FSRP, which would be the 25-year FSRP with additional structures involved. So that concludes my presentation, unless there are any questions.
Thank you. Questions for David? The FSRP law first passed about 10 years ago, right? 2014, 13, 15, 10 years. I think the results really good. Nice. A lot of these improvements are. Comments, questions, David? Before we ask Brian Burnett to present item 6B. Thank you, Mr. P.
Thank you.
Behind tab 6B, Brian's material. Welcome, Mr. Burnett.
Thank you, Mr. Brainerd. Okay. Yep. Good morning, members. I'm Brian Burnham, the PRB Staff Analytical Services Team Lead, and I'm going to provide you with a report on reporting compliance. Oh, I'm pushing the wrong one. My apologies. There we go. All right. So the information provided on this slide contains some of the information that's been reported to us as of the beginning of September, or this month. These numbers reflect all of the fiscal year 2024 data for all of our systems, with the exception of about 13 systems who have not yet reported their 2024 information to us. On this next slide, just a quick reminder that we send email reminders to systems notifying them of upcoming deadlines, and then 2 notices if the system is past their deadline. The latest notice was sent on September 18th to 13 different systems whose reports were due in July, and there'll be 60 days non-compliant starting in October if the reports are not received before then. After the 60 days of non-compliance, the sponsoring entity of the system is notified, and the system is placed on our list of non-compliant systems and would be on the list for this board meeting, for the next board meeting, if they remain on that list at that time.
Can I just ask a question?
Certainly.
The emails that are sent, do we know what we have for email addresses?
For the majority of the systems, yeah. There's been one system that there's been difficulty with confirming the emails for, but every other one, normally when we're giving it to governmental entities, that's like city councils, and we can find that information online or talk with the system to see if there, or even staff members within the cities themselves to see if we can get the right contact information for them. One of our 810 plans was a little bit more difficult to get the information for, as they didn't have the information of their board members directly available to the public on their website to contact. So the communication has more been with the HR department of that system. But the nature of the 810 plans is generally that the governing pension board and the sponsoring entity are kind of one and the same, considering it's like a utility district in this situation.
Thank you.
And so for this 60-day non-compliant list, there's been no changes since our previous board meeting. We're still waiting the final audited financial report for the Nacogdoches County Hospital District Retirement System for the 2024 fiscal year. They were hopeful that it could be submitted to us just right after our last board meeting, but that hasn't come to fruition, so we are still waiting on that report. For the Floresville Electric retirement system, and this is the one I was actually alluding to earlier from your question, they did send the reports back in 2023, but the 2023 audited financial report did not contain one of the reporting requirements, which is to display the indirect and direct investment expense fees that are accruing. We were hopeful that the issue would be fixed for their 2024 reports, but we have not received those yet. However, just last night, we did receive an email from their actuary asking if we could provide them with all of the reports that we need, and they'll be helping the system with getting compliant and getting us all those reports. So I'm hopeful that involving the actuary will lead to getting these reports in a timely manner. So as a reminder, this slide was first included in our last board meeting, and it shows the non-compliance of some of our non-annual reports, but specifically it's highlighting the actuarial audit and the actuarial experience study. On the slide, Dallas ERF has confirmed, or the Dallas Employees Retirement Fund has confirmed that their actuary is working on their experience study, and they expect it to be finalized soon. We're also aware that the Dallas County Hospital District has confirmed with us they are working on the actuarial audit. We expect to have that report sometime, hopefully this year. However, we have not been able to get confirmation that the cities of Beaumont and Laredo are working toward the actuarial audit requirement. And just as a reminder, the actuarial audit is a requirement of the sponsoring entity of these systems, not necessarily the system itself, because they need to hire their own independent actuary to audit the work that the actuary system is doing. There's no questions there. I'll just move on to my final slide, which it provides an overview on our reporting deadlines for the 2025 fiscal year reports now, although I do still have the latest one for 2024 on here, because I've highlighted that because October 1st is the due date that all these systems will become 60 days non-compliant. We have gotten a few in since those 45-day reminders that I sent last week. But for the most part, we're looking right now at about 11 or 10 systems that if they don't get all of their reports in, will be added to that list, and will be getting a letter to their sponsoring entity notifying them of that non-compliance. The first 2025 reporting due date is for the February 28th fiscal year end systems. They're actually due tomorrow. One of the two of the systems in that grouping has already sent their reports in and looks to be compliant. And we're still awaiting the reports of the other system. But unless there are any questions, that would conclude my report on compliance.
Thank you, Mr. Burnham. Questions, Mr. Burnham, on compliance, non-compliance? Seeing none, Madam Chair, I return to you. Thank you very much. That concludes the actual works.
Wonderful, thank you. At this time, I will turn the meeting over to Mr. Zook to introduce agenda items for consent.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will now ask Robert Munter to present items 7A and 7B.
All right, good morning, board members. So my name is Robert Munter. I'm the investment analyst here at the Texas Pension Review Board, and I will be covering items 7A and 7B today. So real quick, in summary for our investment data report, this is mainly going to be an update this board meeting. As Brian has been talking about with the reports, we do receive the bulk of our reports that cover a lot of the investment information at this time, and we are currently working on processing all of them. So far, we have gone through about 40 or so audits and investment type related information, and there's approximately about 20 or so left, and that's including systems that haven't provided us the reports yet, and additionally ones that maybe we received, but there's some form of information that's missing or we were asking for further clarity on. Usually this is around the investment expense information that we're trying to just make sure is as accurate as possible. But what that means is then that at the December board meeting, we will have much more updated information and we'll be able to go into a little bit more depth than at that time for overall what we're seeing from the reports. But ultimately, as I mentioned last time in July, from what we are seeing is that the majority of systems have had a good year as far as 2024 is concerned with their investments. So this has been a positive for them. So they're seeing a lot of their 10-year net returns move up. A lot of them are starting to average out closer to 7%, as in the past we saw some that were very much underperforming that level. So all in all, things are looking good there. And then additionally, during this meeting, I will cover a couple of updates that we're looking to include with future investment data reports. So as I was mentioning, the overall theme that we're seeing from systems is that there has been an improvement in their 10-year net returns. And what we're seeing here as well, and what that means is that when systems are looking at their returns compared against their investment return assumptions, they are now, the majority of them are starting to be plus or minus 1% of their investment return assumption. So that's a lot better from what we've seen in the past, as a number of them before were underperforming by typically 1 to 2% or more. So it's a good thing that they're moving in that direction, but we do still want to pay attention to what's happening in the future and what they're projecting. So obviously, if their return assumptions are a little bit high or unreasonable, that'll make these numbers look worse. So that's something that we want to still continue to monitor. But all in all, just from this table, again, pretty much systems are moving towards being plus or minus 1%. And that's just one more good year pretty much for most of them. And they're at or starting to exceed their return assumptions. So that would be good. This is a chart that we wanted to bring back. And really, this is just looking to examine how systems are with their investment portfolios, how are they performing in regards to the expenses that they're paid for the investments versus how they're actually performing on a 10-year net basis. So again, we're seeing on the right-hand side, that's a histogram that's looking at the distribution of those returns. And what we're seeing, again, the average is starting to consolidate right around the 7% level. And then additionally, as far as the investment expenses are concerned, as I mentioned in the July board meeting, our systems are primarily coming in right around that national average, or a large number of them are actually coming in lower as to the expenses that they're paying for investments, which is a good thing there. So we're not seeing as much of outliers in regards to the investment expenses. And for most of them that are paying more in fees, they are getting a level of return that is justifying it. There still are a few outliers if you're looking at the chart here that are at the lower level of the investment returns. And that's mainly systems that are predominantly fixed income. So this is mainly because they are actually targeting a much lower return assumption. And a lot of these are just systems that are much more mature and are essentially structured in a way that they want to have those fixed income products. But again, all in all, things are looking good for systems compared to the past. Okay, so for this, this is just something that we had last time for the systems that are still sitting at the 7 3/4 investment return assumption or higher. So we have received for these 4 systems, their return information for 2024. So all of them did have a good year. It did move their numbers up in regards to their 10-year net returns, but they are still, some of them are underperforming their investment return assumption by still a large margin. So this is something that we do want to see improve, and whether or not it's a combination of just, more times required for their investments to improve, or additionally investment return assumptions to come down. That is something that we want to continue to monitor because it is important that they do better. I believe Marcia.
Mr. Zook, may I ask a couple of questions here or make a few comments?
Absolutely.
From an actuarial standpoint, I view this as kind of an apples and oranges type of slide. You're looking back at 10 years worth of returns and comparing it to where they're setting their investment return assumptions today. My question is, where did they set it 10 years ago? And essentially, how does that compare? And I would bet that many of these 4 plans had been using even higher investment return assumptions 10 years ago. From my perspective, the whole thing here is when you're setting an investment return assumption, we're not really looking at a 10-year forecast. We're really looking at a 20 or 30-year forecast. And we're trying to set an investment return assumption based on the capital markets at that particular point in time. And what would, if an asset allocation based on your liquidity needs, and I would assume that each of these is fairly mature. These are fairly mature plans with probably benefit payments that exceed current contributions, meaning that investment return is needed to help pay benefit payments. So they require liquidity. My concern is how are these plans, setting the risk level, setting their asset allocation, and how can they potentially, using current capital market assumptions, be coming up with this level of an investment return assumption going forward. And so I would really like, for these 4 plans in particular, I would like to see more information about how these 4 plans, what kind of capital market assumptions, what kind of asset allocation are they looking at that kind of derives this, because nothing that I have seen in recent days for mature plans would give you these kinds of return assumptions. And I'd like to know if the actuaries for the plans are making comments upon this. The assumptions are set by the board, but the actuarial standards of practice require that the actuaries comment if they feel that these are not reasonable assumptions. So I do think that that with respect to these 4 plans, I would like to see more information.
I think it's a great suggestion, Ms. Dush. Can we get with the folks from Harlingen, Big Spring, Orange, and San Angelo to have them provide us some guidance as to where these numbers are coming from as they look forward?
Absolutely. So some of them have provided us some information, but we can definitely get more of that information, and then at the December board meeting, we can look to present all that for you.
And what I would just say is that when you communicate with them, and obviously any representatives that are listening right now, we don't know what the interest rate cycle is going to look like, but I know a lot of plans have been hoping that interest rates were going to continue to go up, which would make it easier to meet their actuarial assumptions. And as I've said before, hope is not a good investment strategy. And considering the Federal Reserve has begun to lower interest rates, it actually makes it even more likely that it's going to be hard for these plans to meet these long-term assumptions that are, close to 8% when we have a 10-year treasury, at 4.06. That's just really hard to see, depending on their asset allocation, and particularly with their liquidity profile that I know for these 4 plans. So if you could ask them, or if you're listening, please be very specific about your capital market assumptions based on your investment policy statement and the asset allocation that you currently have, and show us how that math is going to work. And that would be really, really helpful and allow us to provide good feedback as needed.
Thank you.
Mr. Munter?
All right. Well, then we will continue. So bringing up the final slide for 7A. So regarding the investment data report that we have, we will be looking to add more information that we would get from quarterly reports that systems do receive from their investment consultants. So we will be looking to start collecting that information from systems that do make that publicly available, and as well potentially looking to reach out to systems as needed to start collecting more of that information. So this could include things like liquidity metrics, any form of risk metrics that are more available in those type of reports. And we'll start looking to include a lot of that with our investment data report going forward. And then, of course, if the board, if you have any feedback on things that you would like to see more with the investment data report or less, we will then adjust it as needed to improve that report. But that will ultimately conclude the items for 7A, unless there's any questions before I move on to 7B.
Any questions for Mr. Munner on 7A? Hearing none, please proceed.
Okay, so for 7B, this is concerning the investment practices and performance evaluation guidance document that we have, as well as a requirement that we do have from the legislature from one of the bills updating the statute. So real quick, just as an overview for everyone, the IPPE requirement is a requirement for Texas retirement systems to conduct an evaluation basically every 3 or 6 years, depending upon their asset size. And so this applies to systems with at least 30 million in assets. Systems with less than 30 million in assets are encouraged to, but not required to complete an evaluation. And an evaluation is essentially an independent third party assessing the system's practices for investments, as well as how they performed, and then providing forms of recommendations for improvement. Now, systems with at least 100 million in assets, they're required to complete this evaluation every 3 years. And then systems with 30 million to 100 million are required to complete it every 6. So just this past year, it was when we had the ones for the 100 million plus systems. And then coming up soon, we'll have it to where it's all the systems again for 30 million and up. And just as a quick reminder, pretty much a year ago, we had a board meeting regarding the statute for this, and the board adopted a couple of recommendations for improving the statute that we wanted to make to the legislature. This was really around just clarifying a couple of details in the statute, really related to the due dates for the report, as some of it was duplicative or would create potentially interesting due date scenarios for some systems, depending upon when they ultimately became subject to the requirement. And then additionally, we wanted to add on a total pension liability criteria to the requirement, but only after a system has completed an evaluation. This was to avoid situations where systems right at the threshold specified of the 30 million or 100 million level, if their assets were to fluctuate between the two, it would potentially create scenarios of questioning what requirement would they be subject to. So adding in the total pension liability essentially allows it to help keep a system in that level once they've met the initial qualification for it. And so what ultimately happened was Lambert did pick this up for us and sponsored House Bill 3474. And so what the board has a requirement to do is that as of January 1st, 2026, we do have to adopt a reporting schedule for the requirement now, and that is consistent with the statute. And part of the bill, it did remove a lot of the additional due date specifications throughout the statute and just left the main core that was there in the beginning, which was that the reports are now essentially going to be a cycle base where every 3 years a report is due. It's just a matter of who is ultimately going to be required to report it, right? The systems that have 100 million or more in assets that have to report every 3 years, or pretty much everyone else, 30 million and up, that have to report basically every 6 years. So there's been a lot of clarity there with the update from the bill. And then additionally, they did add in the language for the total pension liability. So that means that we should also avoid those type of situations where systems could have a unique reporting schedule just because of the way that things fell for them in timing. So we won't need to worry about that. So it's ultimately improved the clarity there. This will make it a lot easier for us just to help administer this and provide any form of questions and clarity for systems about when their reports are ultimately due. Now in the packet, we do have the updated guidance document with the red line draft. But this is just a summary real quick of the various changes that we made. The short of it is we updated all the language that was included, as well as all added an additional clarity for systems to understand the how the schedule and cycles is basically going to work. And we do have a PRV schedule there as well, document. And then additionally, we have provided specifying that we will only be using reports as of December 31st of the year prior to whenever a IPPE is going to be required to be due. So the one that we have coming up, and this is something that we've already mentioned to systems, would be the final sort of end date that you would have to have a report due to us. In our last guidance updates was going to be June 1st of 2027. What that means is that if we will only be using reports as of December 31st, 2026 to determine whether or not a requirement or a system is required to report in that 2027 date. And that's mainly also from what we've heard from systems that in general, it takes about 2 to 6 months to complete one of these evaluations. And that can just depend upon the complexity of the system's investments, as well as to what level of evaluation detail they want to go into from whoever that they hire. So with setting that date, it should make sure that there's no system that's going to be forced into very quickly turning around a report. So that way these evaluations can have that quality that they would want, and also not put undue burden on the system. But with that then, this is essentially the reporting schedules that we have. So as I mentioned, June 1st of 2027 is going to be the one that we will have next coming up, and that will cover both the two groups. So that is going to be all systems basically with 30 million or more in assets. And then going forward, just every 3 years will be the date that the next evaluation will be due. And then ultimately in the guidance document, we wanted to make sure, and we've added a couple of schedules for both separating out and having a distinction between the initial report and a subsequent report. So the initial report for systems is, and this is what all systems will still be following for the most part, is that, and this is staying true to the original statute, is that they will first be using their assets to determine what level of requirement or frequency that they will need to do. Once they've completed that initial report at whatever level, every 3 years or every 6 years, then after they've done that initial report, they're following then the addition of a subsequent report, which is where that total pension liability comes into play. So essentially, everything's pretty much staying very similar to how it was originally with the bill. Systems will use their assets, they do the report, and now they're going to include that total pension liability into it to help determine if they continue doing the report and reporting at that frequency. So hopefully this should make it a little bit easier for systems to understand. And for the most part, majority of systems won't really be impacted by it just because of the assets that they have, or they're not on that threshold level. So this will hopefully make it easier for them, and then make it easier for us to administer. And then finally, for next steps, so staff, we will be emailing out all of the updates to systems and looking for feedback. And just as a reminder for the board, the last time that we did this a year ago, when we asked for feedback on these recommendations, we did not receive any feedback at that time from systems. And this is likely, at least from what we've heard from systems, for the most part, again, this is not actually going to impact them in a substantive way. And if anything, this is just going to provide clarity about when those reports are ultimately due, and simplify it a bit there. So ultimately, we don't expect really any forms of feedback that would be outside a normal level of maybe just looking for additional clarity in the guidance document itself. So we will send that out. We will let systems then provide that feedback. And ultimately at the December board meeting is when we are going to be providing the finalized document with any feedback changes that we receive from systems, if we do receive anything. And then as well, that will be when the board will look to vote and then adopt the PRV schedule as what is required. But with that, that will conclude item 7B, unless there's any questions I can answer.
Thank you, Mr. Munter. Any questions or discussion from the board?
Great.
Mr. Munter, I want to commend you and the rest of the staff. Feedback that I've gotten from systems is that this is going to be much easier to follow and much easier for them to understand, when they need to start this process so that they can finish it on time. And obviously systems, that are listening, we really appreciate you, you adhering to the schedule and getting the reports in on time, it obviously is best for your planning as well as obviously for the staff. So thank you for your cooperation in that regard. This concludes the investment committee items. Thank you, Mr. Munter, and Madam Chair, back to you.
I'll move on to agenda item 8, which is our executive director's report, and we'll turn the meeting over to Ms. Morgan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Amy Cardona, the Executive Director of the Tax Review Board. Item 8 is a very quick Executive Director's report to cap off figuring. So item 8A is an update on the staff's participation in the upcoming Telfra Annual Conference in Abilene in a couple weeks. Telfra systems make up more than 40% of our public retirement systems in Texas. So attending this conference is a great opportunity for us to interact with lovers. Several of us staff are going to Abilene for the conference, October 6th and 7th. Our own David Fee, the PRB Chief Actuary, will be moderating an actuarial panel for the 3rd year in a row. And on the panel will be 4 actuaries who actually work with Telfra systems. Some of the topics to be covered will be some of the changes that have occurred recently, especially through the FSRP process, such as benefit changes and sponsor contribution methodologies. They'll also cover impact of the immediate FSRP triggers that David mentioned earlier during this meeting, as well as the 2024 changes to the PRB funding guidelines. And then other various topics that David has worked on in collaboration with the other actuaries. And that will conclude my remarks. I hate if you have any questions.
Very good. Moving on to agenda item number 9, which is our future meeting dates, agenda items, and other arrangements associated with those meetings. Are there any items from the board that you'd like to have on a future meeting agenda? Oops. Hearing none, I'll just run through our future meeting dates. For calendar year 2025, the final PRB meeting of the year will take place December 11th, 2025, with a location to be determined. We've also tentatively set meeting dates for calendar year 2026, which right now are as follows. January 29, 2026, we'll have actuarial committee meeting. February 25th, 2026, we'll have full board meeting. April 30, 2026, actuarial committee meeting. July 23rd, 2026, full board meeting. September 30, 2026, full board meeting, followed by an investment committee meeting. And then December 10th, 2026, the final full board meeting of that year. CRB website will be updated with information following this meeting, and then updated if the need dates change. If there's no other business of the board and no objection, I'll move to adjourn this meeting. Give them a chance.